It was a real breakthrough. A completely different modern ship, powerful, with modern lines and beautiful architecture.
There were hundreds of proposals concerning even the very concept of the ship. For example, replacing one system with another, and so on.
The designers, military acceptance, factory, everybody did well. They weren't stubborn and created everything exactly as we asked them.
956 is not a leader. She's not designed to lead a fleet of ships out to sea. She's a lone hero. She can strike so hard that you wouldn't have any desire to challenge her again.
It's easy to notice features of an era in the appearance of any museum ship. At all times, a warship has been the epitome of scientific and technical progress, a concentration of the most advanced technologies and the embodiment of the brightest engineering ideas. Project 956, destroyer Bespokoyny, is a prominent example of Russian shipbuilding in the late 20th century. Since recently, this destroyer has been moored in a permanent berth at Kronstadt. It's a unique case where a first-rank ship, whose sister ships are still commissioned by the Navy and are on active combat duty, becomes a museum.
Данный комплекс ракетного оружия веден Пелинг 265,5, дистанция 60, цель в зоне, 3,8 состыкован. Есть.
In the spring of 1970, the Soviet Navy celebrated the birthday of the Soviet state's creator, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, on an unprecedented scale across 3 oceans and 10 seas.
Hundreds of naval aircraft of all types and classes, various marine infantry units, surface and submarine ships of different types and purposes. All of the Soviet Union's fleets participated in the largest maneuvers in the history of our country. It was codenamed Ocean.
With those grandiose maneuvers, carried out in the Atlantic Pacific and Indian Oceans, the USSR didn't just demonstrate its ambition to head out to the seas, but also its ability to take control of any regions that represented the geopolitical interests of the Soviet Union. The ocean maneuvers, which some specialists still consider to be the grandest in world naval history, were carried out in the presence areas of NATO forces, in sight of the potential enemy ships. Some Western military experts acknowledged that the Soviet Navy had managed to compellingly contest the US Navy's superiority on the world's seas. Observers were impressed both by the scale of the maneuvers and the quality of the participating ships, the majority of which had been built during the previous 10 to 15 years. These were modern ships with powerful missile weapons of various designs, as well as advanced radio and electronic equipment. In its turn, the Soviet High Command analyzed the maneuvers and determined that their navy lacked new artillery ships.
At that time, the concept of rocket weapons was dominant. It was considered to be the answer to any question. Rockets could do anything. It's by no mere coincidence that Nikita Khrushchev spoke highly of them. But what about their practical applications? Small wars and armed conflicts showed that artillery was 10 times cheaper than rockets. Not only cheaper, but also more effective. All those local conflicts had demonstrated the importance of landing operations, and landing craft need escorts to protect them. Deploying rocket-carrying ships to defend those landing ships wouldn't achieve the objective. It made no sense to attack small ships with rockets. Only artillery was up to the task.
Meanwhile, in the late 1960s, the Design Bureau of the Arsenal Leningrad plant was developing an automatic dual-purpose artillery system with a caliber of 130mm. While it had some advantages, the initial single-barreled variant failed to reach the required firing rate of 60 shots per minute during trials. So the decision was made to redesign the system and make it twin-barreled. On September 1, 1969, the USSR government issued a decree approving a 10-year naval shipbuilding program that provided for the construction of new missile and artillery ships, namely destroyers. So, while the Soviet Navy was demonstrating its power during the ocean maneuvers, their nation's shipbuilding science and research facilities began working on the project for one of the most powerful destroyers of the late 20th century. The general operational requirements prepared by the Soviet Navy in 1969 described the project differently: a ship capable of supporting amphibious landings. Its main tasks were the destruction of enemy shore targets, men and material, as well as fire support for landing forces and providing protection for them during sea transportation. Essentially, the ship was built around automatic 130mm deck turret artillery mounts. However, as the US Navy began constructing Spruance-class all-purpose missile destroyers in 1972, the Soviet High Command reviewed the designated purpose of the project, which had already been assigned the number 956 and codename Tsarich.
We had received information that the US was building a new destroyer. And when our spies abroad started to dig deeper, so to say, they discovered that the American destroyer would be all-purpose and that its artillery was not the primary feature. It would fight against submarines and have good radar equipment. Moreover, it could be modernized to carry missiles.
The project was developed by the Severnaya Design Bureau according to a contract with the Soviet Navy's head shipbuilding department. The engineers prepared 10 variants of an outline design for the future destroyer, and the Navy needed to select one of them. It needed to both meet the current requirements and rise to the challenges of the future.
Once the project was approved by the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, the designers set to work. That is, the Severnaya Bureau began developing a detailed design. That's when the military representatives that were accredited at the Severnaya Bureau came into play. I was assigned the role of head overseer of this ship project.
The technical project of the ship was approved in November 1973. Work on the construction documentation straight after. By that moment, the destroyer's project had been finalized, and its recognizable and unique appearance had shaped up.
In the mid-1950s, Jim Niedermeyer, an American naval architect, said that a ship's exterior, as that of a possible force with an intimidating effect, shows first the sincerity of a country's intentions, and second, the national determination. That's how a warship should look.
Specifications of Project 956 destroyer Bespokoyny. Length 156.5 meters. Beam 17.2 meters. Mean draft 5.2 meters. Total displacement 7,940 tons. Armament. Missiles. 8 Musket M anti-ship missiles in 2 quadruple launchers. 2 Uragan Tornado surface-to-air missile launchers. Reserve ammunition, 48 missiles. Artillery, 2 AK-130 twin artillery mounts, caliber 130mm. 4 AK-636 barrel automatic mounts, caliber 30mm. 2 RBU-1000 anti-submarine rocket launchers. 2 twin-tube torpedo launchers, caliber 533mm. Aircraft on board, KA-27 series helicopter. Propulsion, 2 steam turbines, power 100,000 horsepower. Full speed 32 knots. Cruising range 5,000 miles at 18 knots.
2.5 years before the lead ship, Submarine's planned completion, we had a very difficult situation with boiler manufacturing. A decision was made to install different boilers, which were available and, in general, had been working reliably on numerous previous cruisers. Now, try to imagine the size of the foundations that have been prepared for those initial boilers. They needed to be cut out, and they were huge. Then, new blueprints needed to be developed to fit those existing boilers into the ship. And finally, the plant had to manufacture all this. Without any false modesty, the Severnaya Bureau and Shtanov plant did a tremendous job. They made all of it in a matter of months. As a result, we completed the ship right on time.
The Project 956 lead ship was commissioned in January 1981. Conceived as a specialized ship to support amphibious landings, she transformed into a first-rank destroyer as a result of 10 years of adjustments and changes made to the project. Apart from her initial purpose, her capabilities now included delivering missile strikes against enemy surface ships and protecting her own squadron against aerial threats. The destroyer became a versatile combat unit capable of accomplishing quite a wide range of tasks. As another reminder of her multi-purpose abilities, the lead ship of the series was named Submarine, modern in Russian, which NATO adopted as the code name for the entire class of Soviet Project 956 destroyers.
In terms of military economic appraisal, the Mosquito missiles instantly increased the ship's quality. Later, foreign specialists called her a wolf among sheep, i.e., among other countries' ships, except for those of the US. But compared to her American counterpart, she was stronger in terms of her artillery and missile weaponry.
Popular literature cites an impressive fact that this destroyer can unleash 6 tons of ammunition per minute on an enemy, which is comparable to a broadside salvo from battleships such as Iowa and Virginia. They have 15 tons, and here we have 6 tons. So, at least in terms of ammunition, volume and weight, these destroyers rank second after battleships. At one point, we received the Naval Commander-in-Chief's prize for gunnery. We had a very difficult exercise. We were to fire a gun at a surface target while a cruise missile was launched from another ship. We needed to shift fire from the surface target to the aerial target and shoot down this missile with artillery fire only, without activating our AA defense systems. We managed to destroy this target. It was an LA-15, a cruise missile, a little larger than the Harpoon, but with the same velocity. The aiming, control, and target acquisition systems of these AK-130s gives these guns the ability to shoot down guided missiles. There aren't many comparable weapons in the world.
The development of rocket armament effectively ended the history of artillery duels between ships. Today, one missile fired by this Mosquito M anti-ship system is enough to destroy a ship with a displacement of up to 20,000 tons. That's equivalent to the heaviest cruisers of World War II. The Mosquito system was adopted for service in 1984 and was being produced for 30 years. It's an extremely effective anti-ship weapon. It's impossible to evade a low-altitude cruise missile, and the navies of potential enemies didn't have reliable means of intercepting it until recently.
Yes.
Project 956 destroyers were the first ships to be armed with Mosquito missiles. Moreover, the first 2 ships of the series, Submarine and Otchayeni, carried out several successful Mosquito launches as early as during their acceptance trials.
This missile is fast, low-flying and reliable. Here, fast means a speed of Mach 2. It's low-flying. This missile flies literally tens of meters above water, which makes it stealthy and allows it to emerge from over the horizon rather quickly. It can be detected at a range of around 25 to 30 kilometers, and it travels twice the speed of sound, so it can close this distance quickly. The electronic and mechanical components of air defense systems simply don't have any time to react. Thank God that we never used these missiles in combat. Mosquitoes never saw combat use in our Navy, but we fired them at practice targets and launched the actual Mosquito missiles during exercises. We never had a single failure.
The gun looks a little unusual alongside guided missile systems and the 130mm main battery turrets. The 21K M45mm dual-purpose gun was an integral part of the anti-aircraft defenses of every Soviet ship, from coast guards to battleships, in the 1930s to 40s. Of course, it's been a museum exhibit for a long time, but it's still used as a salute cannon on Russian warships. As for the air defences on Project 956 destroyers, they comprise two M22 Uragan medium-range missile launching systems, a naval version of the famous Buk air defence missile system. As another means of protection against cruise missiles at close range, the destroyer has four AK-630M 30mm 6-barreled air defence artillery systems. For their extremely high density of fire, they were nicknamed metal cutters.
These ships can use their armament normally when the sea state is at 6 according to the WMO scale. We have special marine stabilizers here which allow us to decrease the amplitude in conditions of strong rolling and pitching, and that provides a larger window for weapon application. I believe that it's possible to use the weapons even in more severe conditions. It's impossible for a ship of this size to head into a storm and suffer a severe accident, unless it's a tropical hurricane perhaps. The ship's structure has several inserts made of soft iron that allow her to bend on waves. Because the ship is long, 156 meters, if I remember correctly, her hull can bend up to 30 meters on waves. If it were solid steel, it would be ripped apart and the ship could break in two. And I heard of it happening to other, not our, ships.
The project had one weakness: the discovery and destruction of submarines. To address this, Sergei Gorshkov, he had wonderful intuition, proposed the preparation of a second project in parallel with this one. It was later assigned the number 1155. Now, that project had excellent anti-submarine armament. Together, those ships formed a pair that would perform their defense screening duties remarkably.
The life of a submariner is hard, especially during combat activities. Nowadays, no one allows submarines to approach at a close range. The use of torpedoes by submarines seems doubtful to me. Today, submarines are used only as cruise missile carriers. But then, what's the difference whether a cruise missile approaching my ship was launched from a sub, aircraft, or another ship? I have to deal with the missile itself. So it turned out that the air defense system provides all-round protection. Hence this situation with anti-submarine armament. Yes, it's weak, but in practice, it showed that it's sufficient.
Between 1980 to 1993, the Soviet and then Russian Navy commissioned 17 Project 956 destroyers. Thus, Sarich became one of the most numerous series in our Navy, and the last large series of capital warships developed in the USSR.
When the official trials of the lead ship, Submarine, were almost over, a state commission drew up a list of proposals aimed at improving the combat and operational capabilities of the ship. There were lots of them, hundreds of proposals. They were all sent to Moscow for the Ministry and Commander-in-Chief to review. After some consideration, decisions were made about all of them. Some aspects needed to be implemented starting with the second ship, that is, the first series produced. Other features needed to be implemented starting with the third ship, depending on their importance. That's why the ships are different. It's due to these decisions made on the basis of those proposals. Then again, we needed to respect some taste preferences of the ship commanders. For example, one had previously commanded a ship of some other project, and his bunk had been placed this way or another. The designers tried to satisfy these requests and suggestions because they didn't require serious economic or financial expenses.
The central command post was adapted to be more convenient in combat because the officers already had experience in the application of weapons. So, experienced officers put forward requirements for better operational efficiency. There were big changes concerning the crew's living conditions. We made the first mess hall with a service counter, like in the merchant fleet and on civilian vessels. We gave up the mess kettle system, with one kettle per table and one senior person with unknown moral qualities responsible for distributing food to young sailors. In our system, each sailor would come individually to get his food. Moreover, it was impersonal. The galley crew couldn't see whether it was a senior sailor or a young one. The officer of the deck was there to supervise it all. Sailors weren't assigned tables, and we never had a single incident in the mess hall thanks to this system. As a result of these changes, we ended up with a standard project ship, but one that's more convenient both in combat and everyday life.
Destroyer Bespokoyny, the 15th ship in the series, was laid down in the Soviet Union, but was commissioned into the Russian Federation's Navy in February 1992. She became the first ship since 1917 to fly St. Andrew's naval colours.
The ship has an unusual story. Initially, she was built for the Black Sea Fleet, but after the events that led to the Soviet Union's collapse, it was decided to transfer her to the Pacific Fleet. Then there were rumors about transferring her up north. In the end, it was decided to keep her in the Baltic Fleet. And all this happened basically during the first 3 years of her service. She's the second Project 956A ship. This means that she was equipped with a slightly different main strike system and the Uragan universal missile system, modernized according to the Tornado program to ensure air defense. Moreover, the radio systems are different. So while being almost identical on the outside, the ship has some differences in comparison with the previously built ships of this project series.
In July to August 1996, Bespokoyny participated in naval exercises as a part of a ship strike force. While providing air defense and fire support for landing troops, the destroyer's crew demonstrated excellent gunnery skills by shooting down 7 missile targets. The ship was recognized as being the best in the squadron and was awarded the Navy Commander-in-Chief Prize. In the following years, destroyer Bespokoyny was praised for skillful missile and artillery fire on multiple occasions, with her crew demonstrating the highest level of combat training. In May 2018, Bespokoyny arrived in Kronstadt, where she was moored in a permanent berth as a museum ship, an outstanding memorial to Russian shipbuilding. As of the release day of this video, 3 Project 956 destroyers remain on active duty with the Russian Navy. Destroyers of this class are surface missile ships of the 3rd generation and surpassed all of their foreign counterparts built in the 1970s to 80s in all respects, except for anti-submarine warfare, which they weren't intended for anyway. Moreover, the anti-ship and artillery armament of these ships is still comparable or stronger than that of the US Arleigh Burke-class destroyers of the 4th generation.
I haven't seen any commander who wouldn't love their ship, because I believe that there are certain relationships between a commander and their ship. Something that can't be described and is not easy to understand, because a ship is a part of her commander's life. It might even be the best part of their life, because you can be whatever you want, but being a ship's commander is forever.
The designed service life of Project 956 ships is over 20 years, and they are engineered with significant modernization capabilities. This is proven by the fate of 4 destroyers that currently serve with the People's Republic of China's Navy. The experience that the Severnoye Bureau gained while designing all-purpose first-rank ships with guided missile weapons for offshore maritime and ocean zones, such as the Submarine class and its modernized versions, found its reflection in the creation of new ships of this type commissioned by the Russian Navy. Bespokoyny's hawkish features are clearly visible in them.